I was very lucky to have rather exotic childhood because my father was in the oil business and my parents met in Kuwait. Mum was a secretary from Wagga Wagga, my father was a petroleum engineer from London. And they were both working for KOC, Kuwait Oil Company, and they met there. And they lived there for 16 years and they had me. And having one child is very portable. You can travel all around the Persian Gulf and all around the world and do a million things when you've only got one child. They were both very interested in the arts and the humanities and music and literature and theatre and obviously travel. They were very independent people. They did a lot of competitive sailing. They did a lot of amateur theatre. They were very, very active. And so I was very lucky to grow up in that environment, which I think was, very much a humanities environment, even though my father was a scientist. When I was 9, we moved back to England because the companies my father worked for were partially British Petroleum. Then 4 years passed and my grandmother fell over and broke her hip at South West Rocks on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and so Mum decided she'd had enough of that marriage anyway. And she didn't like the cold weather in England and she needed to come home to look after her mum. So I was at 13 given the choice, you can stay with Dad, you can come home to Australia. And so I decided to come to Australia. So I ended up growing up in a country town in Kempsey, going to the state high school, which was pretty different from my exotic experiences. But I loved it and I had a lot of relatives on the Macleay Valley, and so a whole different life. And I excelled in the humanities, in English and history particularly. And I ended up getting into Sydney University to do arts. I thought I'd go and do law because I'd studied Latin in England, but I didn't get in, and it's probably a good thing. I had a go at it later for, sort of as a part-time thing, and no, it's not for me. So I did English and medieval history and French and archaeology, and I ended up with an honours degree in early English language and literature, having done medieval French and stuff. These days you'd call it a medieval studies degree, and I absolutely adored it, and I never wanted to leave university. But at the end of that, I thought, what am I going to do? And I then, after some time away working for the Commonwealth Bank and doing archives things, I went back and did a PhD in Old Norse, which is what I'd always wanted to do. And I got in to go to Oxford, but I didn't have the money. So I did the PhD in Old Norse, and I was going to be an Old Norse academic, but the government cut all the funding for humanities in the 1990s, and that was that. So I fell back on archives. So that's basically who I am. I worked for a variety of archives, and I have been the Sydney Diocesan Archives for the Anglican Church Diocese of Sydney since 1996 full time. But I joined in 1990, and every day is a new day with new challenges. So it's never a bore. You never get bored. When I was in about second year uni, one of my tutors in Old English was someone called Maggie Shapley, who at the time was doing a master's in Old English. And she was also doing the archives course at the University of New South Wales. And I just loved Chaucer. And I worked really hard for the tutes that I had with Maggie to get everything right. And I was that super keen and eager little second year student going, me, pick me, can I answer the question? Now, when I found out that she was doing a master's in Old English and this course in archives administration, that stuck in the back of my head as a sort of combination. So those years later, when I was standing in front of Fisher Library at Sydney University at the end of my fourth year, honours year, thinking, what on earth am I going to do next? And so I wandered around the campus and I thought, what do I like? And standing in front of Fisher Library, I thought, well, I like books. I've always liked books. So that's when I thought, oh, well, maybe I have to become a librarian. And I knew about the rare books library as well. So I thought, well, maybe that. So I went and did what you did in those days. I went and looked at the calendar, and flicking through the pages of the calendar, I saw the section on archives administration. So I read through that and I thought, oh, that's it. To hell with librarianship. I'm going to be an archivist, because it was just so much more interesting. And then as I was walking home, I was thinking about it and I thought, hang on a minute, I've met someone who's done this. That tutor of mine in second year The one who was doing the Masters in Old English, she did this course in, well, then I'm doing it. That's what I'm doing. And I always wondered who she was, because I couldn't remember her name. And I was at the Archives Conference in Alice Springs in 2006. And we're at this fabulous conference dinner out in the desert. And I'm sitting next to Maggie Shapley, who by then, was running the archives at ANU, I think. And she was quite a luminary. And she talked about something about doing a Masters in Old English. And I just stopped and I went, oh my, it's you! You're the one! You're the one who's responsible for me becoming an archivist. I said, what did I do? And so I told her the story. Anyway, so she was quite pleased that she'd unknowingly had so much influence. I didn't go immediately into being an archivist, but that's where the idea was planned. I'd applied to go to Sydney Uni to do a master's PhD, and I applied to do the archives course at the same time. I got accepted to go to University of New South Wales. I had a fabulous year at the University of New South Wales, and I met a number of people who are still my very close friends. And I think out of our year, this is 1986, out of our year of 30 students, I'd say the majority of us are still working in archives. It was a wonderful course. We worked like dogs. We had about 1 week off, but we all just absolutely adored it. It was a life-changing experience. The memorable moment have to be what, everyone calls the troubles. And then we had to sack all the staff and go totally volunteer, one person, one job, and rebuild. So that's memorable because it's crazy when you think about it. But it came about through lack of transparency, lack of communication, lack of accountability, and that's just the truth. But I learned something very, very important, which I've passed on to other people, that when there is a crisis in governance in an organisation, don't stay to save it, walk away and let it crash. And at the time we thought, we cannot abandon the ASA. The whole history and everything, you can't abandon it. We must do what we can to save it. But then later on we learned that that's a way of obfuscating things in a way. And we did get there to the crisis and the resolution with the help of Associations Forum. So we got there and it all worked out in the end. But it was a very valuable lesson because obviously I'd never been in a situation like that before. We're all good at archives, but we're not so experienced with corporate governance. People were really angry, really, really upset. And you can understand why. You can completely appreciate why. But it was a bit tough. Well, I think it's bringing us all together, actually. Bringing the tribe together. So many of us work alone, or maybe just with one other person. And since COVID, we don't have many face-to-face meetings. The branches, New South Wales branch was just so, it's like a great big warm blanket. Once a month you got to go and be with your own tribe, learn interesting things, see and hear interesting things, go to interesting places, learn, and have so much fun and make wonderful lifelong friends. We were lucky then. It's a loss post-COVID that there's not so much of that. Hopefully it can replace. But through the branches and the SIGs and very much the conferences, to go to the conference and particularly every year and have several days together with people who are just like you, reminds you you're not weird and you're not marginal and the work isn't unimportant. It actually is everything that we think it is. Saving the world one document at a time. So I think that's the key achievement, is to bring us together. Every single thing that we do and host brings us together as people. That just improves our lives, leaps and bounds. But obviously, then there's all the actual stuff that we do, the education, advocacy, the publications. So, why an archivist wouldn't join the ASA, I don't know, because the ASA is giving you almost your whole life. As an archivist, and the professional development, the learning that you get through being involved with the ASA is irreplaceable. So that's the key outstanding achievement. So unlike lawyers and doctors, we don't have a professional association with teeth. We have a professional association that does its best to put itself out there without the teeth. The archivists who created the ASA back in 1975, and everyone who's worked for it and with it since then, has contributed greatly, individually and collectively, to promoting the profession in Australia. Because without the association, without us, well, we'd just be back being the poor cousins of the librarians. When I did the archives course in '86, I remember Anne Patterson telling us, no one will ever understand what you do. Everyone will think, when, you know, you spend your whole life at parties going, no, it's not an alchemist, no, I'm not a librarian. It's all, no, I'm not, this is what I am and this is what I do. And she said, no one will know what it is. No one will care as much as they ought, and no one will pay you as much money as they should. But if you're doing, you know, one of the most important things in the world that you can do, and you've got to have a heart for a fight, because you'll be fighting for the whole of the rest of your life to kind of justify this. But it's a good fight, so fight the good fight. And that's what the ASA does. It fights the good fight every single day, and it empowers all of us. It gives us the authority and the weight, as it were, even within our workplaces, to fight the good fight. At a societal level, yes, it's the same thing. We were helped by the bicentenary in 1988 because there was a lot of money around, and you know, we've been helped by the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse because it was just all about records. If it weren't for the ASA, the profession would not be in the state it is in now, the good state, and we as archivists would not be able to respond to these extremely important calls upon our expertise to make information available. At a societal level, this is the power that we have as professionals to be able to do this. And everything that the ASA does to help us to be better archivists and to communicate within our organisations, this is what I can do. Well, I joined immediately as a student because Anne Patterson told us we all had to. Membership lapsed probably when I went back to university. And I didn't join up again until the early 2000s, I think 2002. And in fact, I was having a lot of tough times at home. Things were really tough. And it was just work and home. And it struck me that I needed something else. I needed a place where I could be with my own kind and a place where I could be happy and successful. You know, I sort of joined a bit peripherally, but fairly quickly, I became convener of Religious Collections SIG, and I did that for a number of years. And then in 2006 at the Alice Springs conference, Katie Bird and Julia Matt said, we reckon you should be convener of New South Wales branch because they're looking for someone. And it hadn't occurred to me. But they went, yeah, you could do this, you should do it. And that sort of led upward, becoming a councillor in 2009? 10, I think. I did 9 or 10 years, and then in 2019 walked away from it, which was a good thing because I had a brain tumour in 2020 and had to have that operated, and then there's COVID and blah, blah. But I came back again because for the same reason, I wanted to be with my own kind. I missed the life of being on council. You know, I work alone. I've worked alone for 30 years or more, and I really needed to be with my archivists. And as you know, I've been managing editor of A&M and secretary of the Mander Jones Awards, and well, obviously secretary, treasurer, vice president, and just councillor as well. The challenge is always that we have no teeth, and that people don't take us seriously. The other challenge is the marginalisation and the ignorance, because people go to high school and they go to libraries, but not many of them go to schools with archives. An ideal thing would be to be able to stretch out into those schools, because those schools have, you know, they have archives on site. That's an advocacy thing. It's also a capacity thing. Somehow, I don't know whether it's a records retention scheme document that's worked so well with the independent schools, so popular. But we really need to do something with the primary schools and the high schools of Australia, and keep on reaching out to more of the independent schools, Ditto Religious Collections. I mean, we were well represented always with the Christians and the Anglicans and the Catholics and the Unitings and the Lutherans. But what about the many other religious? So there's another challenge. And also collections of faith, tradition, SIG sort of fell in a heap. I wasn't minded to resurrect it. I thought I'd done my bit. Someone else can do that. But it needs to be done. It needs to come back up. There's a challenge to someone watching this. So, obviously looking at the sections of society and organisations that have archives that we don't have any coverage of. The other thing, obviously, is we don't have very many regional conferences. So I know the Royal Australian Historical Society has got good outreach with them, and that's fantastic. But we need to have more outreach with them too, like do something for them. So I suppose these are things I've been thinking for years and years and years. Obviously AI is the next big thing. How is it going to affect the work? Hopefully, how's it going to help us? I'm very keen to hear at the conference and from papers in A&M and things like that, what people think beyond new technology, new changes. We manage content regardless of technology, so I don't spend much time being fearful because we've been managing content since, cave paintings in Lascaux and papyrus, and it's all just technological change, and that's normal. We should expect that and just learn it. But not many people are trained to manage content in the way that we do. The management of the records and then the reference and access. Nobody else is trained to do it the way we are. The challenge is always to explain what it is that we can do that's unique. I remember one time we had a gathering in Sydney to talk about this very thing, whether we should change the name of the association. And Kylie Percival, she stood up and just said, no, we're archivists. Let us not run away from this. People can say we're this or that, but we're not. We're archivists, and we have something very, very special and very particular to offer. And if people don't understand that, then that's our fault because we haven't explained it well enough or frequently enough. And so there's a challenge, I think, that we will always have, is to explain what is an archivist and what does an archivist do. Because people go, it's an old-fashioned word, but it's not. That's just a silly perception. So it's a communication issue. So on the big picture, I think it's really important for us to always find better ways to communicate what it is that we're about and what we can give. What we can give on a micro and a macro, a local, state, national, international, worldwide level. We are not people who look at the past. We are futurists. We're always planning for the future. People are amazed when I say that because they go, oh, it must be so nice, your pretty history, all that. And I go, I have no time for that. I'm just constantly thinking about what are the implications of what I do now for 20, 50, 100, 200. How am I going to plan for 500 years hence? For archivists, for the future, I'd say one of the big things we always need to focus on is empowering our archivists to be advocates. Not everyone can. It's not everyone's personality. Well, not everyone has to do it, but really you do. And I think the ASA is an ideal place for us to empower our members to fight the good fight. If you've ever got a message to people, should you go on council? What you don't know, we can teach you. But what you learn when you're there, it's the most amazing free professional development, because you learn about not just the team thing and working as a team, but you learn about all these other people and all their personalities and all their jobs and all their archives and all their contacts. And then you learn about, all the advocacy stuff. And it'll teach you so much. You'll just improve your life so much.